we'll continue with Paticca Samuppada, a Pali word translated in English is dependent origination, Paticca Samuppada. So there's a sutra, Paticca Samuppada Sutra, because we have talked about it for quite a few weeks ago, and we may have forgotten some part of the concept in there. Many people ask, why were we born into this world? Where do I come from? Where would I go after I died? What is this existence all about? So it explains all these phenomena. Maybe just have a review today so that we can firmly remember it. Paticca Samuppada. The first one is, look at the Pali side, Avijja Paccaya Sankhara. Usually they chant it out, Avijja Paccaya Sankhara. They chant it out. But right now we don't have to chant it out. Avijja Paccaya Sankhara. It means dependent on ignorance, volitional reaction arises. I go through 3 because 1, 2, and 3 explains the past. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 explains the present. And 11 and 12 explains the future. So you can explain Paticca Samuppada in 2 ways. One is a sequential time interpretation. The other is a cyclical interpretation. You can, in other words, you can explain it from the perspective of time. You can also explain it from a perspective of space. What is this world made up of? Time and space. So to explain life, the Buddhist teaching is not using a God concept to explain life. Life is not created by a creator. Life comes about through causality, causation. So this explains the existence of life in a series of flux of transient series. So Avijja Paccaya Sankhara is dependent on ignorance, volitional reaction arises. Number 2, Sankhara Paccaya Vijnanam is dependent on volitional reaction, consciousness arises. 3, Vijnana Paccaya Namarupam, dependent on consciousness, the mind and body arises. The first one is because of ignorance, dependent on ignorance, because of ignorance, volitional reaction arises. Volitional reaction, that means because of our ignorance, our senses correspond to all environments. Our eyes correspond to sight, correspond to all matters, ears to sound, tongue to taste, nose to smell, body to touch. All our senses correspond to our outer environments, and we act accordingly. It produces mental afflictions, and we act accordingly because of ignorance. When we correspond with the outside world, a lot of mental afflictions arise in us. What are these mental afflictions? Greediness, jealousy, hatred, disappointment, fear, anxiety, because we react to the world. Through ignorance, because of this reaction, we perform deeds. The body can perform a lot of deeds. Body performs behavior, and this behavior could be in the form of good behavior, bad behavior, and neutral behavior. But not just the body behavior performed in the form of behavior to outside environments, we also, our mouth, our creating speech, cursing, lying, slandering, double-tonguing. Our mouth also reacts. Our mind reacts. And of course, the mind is the master controlling the speech and behavior. So all these, when we react with the environments because of our ignorance, we perform karma, karmic energy. Volitional reaction arises. So From the perspective of bad deeds, what did we do? The body can perform killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct for bad deeds. Of course, sometimes you also perform good deeds. So we create karma. So karmic energy, the nature of karmic energy is has three natures. It's either good, bad, or neutral. Sometimes you perform good karma, sometimes bad karma, sometimes neutral karma. So this volitional reaction, that means in the process of reacting to it, we are creating karmic energy. Every thought creates energy. Every speech, every behavior creates energy. Karmic energy. And energy would not just disappear and don't worry, you kill somebody. Don't worry, because you kill somebody, you won't. If you never get caught, it does not matter. No, it matters, because you already have created the karmic energy, the energy of killing, of destroying the life of another sentient being. You lie, you think nobody would know about it, but you create the energy already. And just look at it scientifically, according to the conservation of energy, energy never just disappears. They may change form, but it never disappears. It never disintegrates into nothing. It may change form. So because of our ignorance, all this volitional reaction giving rises to karmic energy arises. And when this karmic energy arises, it produces karma. And because of this karma, we have retribution. So depending on volitional reaction, consciousness arises. What is this consciousness? A person, every sentient being has 8 consciousnesses. We have the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, the mentality, the 6 consciousness. Those are easy to identify. 6 consciousnesses. But there's also the 7th consciousness. We call it the manas consciousness. That is the ego consciousness. Because whenever mental affliction arises, you always attach the ego to it. That ego has been grounded in there since many, many lives ago. You always have that ego consciousness, the 7th consciousness in there, the manas consciousness. And also there is the 8th consciousness, which is called the alaya consciousness, and there is the banking, storage consciousness. So in other words, all these consciousnesses create all these volitional reactions, and when you die, you mean nothing retained? No, it would store in the alaya consciousness, a Sanskrit word meaning banking, storing all the seeds, storing everything in there. It's just like the disk drive in your computer. There are a lot of programs in the computer. There's the keyboard, the front end of the keyboards, like the front, when you key in information, is the keyboards. And then it goes to the program. More or less the program is the 6th consciousness. And the keyboard is more or less your senses, your eyes, your nose, your ears. It gets into the programming and then it will react. When it reacts, it stores immediately into the disk drive. It wouldn't get away. So for everything you've done, there's volitional reaction to it, and it gets all stored in the consciousness, in your consciousness. We call it the alaya consciousness, one of the 8 consciousnesses. Now, number 1 and number 2, we can say, we can ask another question. Where do we come from? How come I get born into this world? By examining number 1 and number 2, you may be able to get the answer. The time perspective of the Buddhist teaching is not just one life. It extends into previous lives. And if you you haven't got enlightened, getting away from the loop of reincarnation, you'll roll into the next life. So looking at this present life, you say, where do I come from? When a person dies, your eye consciousness would go. You can't see anymore. You're dead. At the juncture of death, the first consciousness that would be gone would be your eye consciousness. So the doctor rolls into your eyes and you know that, oh, this person is dead. And then your tongue consciousness, your nose consciousness, and gradually your ear consciousness. The ear consciousness would disintegrate, would disappear at a little later stage than the eye and the tongue. So that's the reason why when a person dies, he may not be able to see, he just couldn't feel any taste, no more smell because there's no movement of air, but he still can hear. He still may be able to hear you, even though he's clinically pronounced dead. He may still hear you. So, but all this consciousness would finally go. Your nose, your eye, your nose, your ear, your tongue, your body, your touch consciousness all go. And then what happened to the 6, 7 consciousness? The 6 and the 7 consciousness, the mano and the manas, would shrink together and get stored into alaya consciousness. In the ego and the mentality would shrink because, oh, I'm dead. So he knows he's dead. And then it shrinks into the ego consciousness, and then it further shrinks into the alaya consciousness, which is the banking consciousness. The example I use is a disk drive, but in this case, it's not a visible disk drive. It's not material we are talking about. A computer is material. Right now, we transcend material stage now into the consciousness level. Consciousness is not material. What am I made up of? What do you make up of? It's the body and mind. The body is material, but the mind, other than the brain, is not material. It is spiritual. Spiritual cannot be detected. Spiritual cannot even be detected by scientific methods. So that's the reason why science cannot prove the existence of consciousness after death. That's why science cannot prove the Bardo stage. In other words, you know what Bardo stage is? Science cannot prove ghosts. But science cannot prove non-ghosts too. In other words, science cannot say there's no consciousness, but science cannot prove there is consciousness. There's so many things that science cannot prove. In the discovery of atom, we think that many years ago, the scientists said atom is the smallest. First we have elements, and then we have atoms, and then no. We can further subdivide atom into protons and electrons. So in other words, it can further, the smallest can be further disintegrated into smaller articles. And how would it go? What's the limit to it? No scientist can tell you. What is the limit to the smallest? Many years ago, atom is the smallest, then proton, electrons, neutrons, and maybe neutron can be further subdivided into even smaller. But the scientists have stopped at the proton level, neutron level. They can't do anything more. There's limitation in science. That's the smallest. So the scientists cannot determine what is the smallest because there's so much more to do. And then we say, can the scientists determine what is the largest? No. What is the largest? Thousands of years ago, we think that this world is the largest. When we were in China, many years, thousands of years ago, we thought that, oh, China is the only state, it's the only place in the universe. And then there's the discovery of North America. So in other words, it's larger and larger. We discover more and more. And then before we land that rocket onto the moon, we thought that this Earth is the largest. Now, no, this galaxy. How many galaxies are there? Galileo, many years ago, he invented the telescope, and he told everybody that this is not the only world. There's a lot more in outer space. So what's the largest? There's no end to the discovery of the largest. So you are telling me what is the beginning? What is the end? There's no beginning, there's no end. But when we explain life existence, we like to simplify it. We like to simplify it so that people can understand it. So some people will say, you are created. There's a creator that created you. It's that simple. You were created. The whole world was created by one creator. But can you give a simple answer to such a complicated question? You are created. But many people believe in it though. They believe in I'm created. Our forefathers were created. It's just like, what's the largest and what's the smallest? You were a consciousness before this body. And somehow, a man and a woman come together to make love, for example. And then you zoom into the mom's body to form the embryo, to form that, we call it the third one, mind and body, nama rupa. That means out of causality, there's a man and a woman coming to have that relationship, and you are in a Bardo stage. Your consciousness is at a Bardo stage, which means that your consciousness is roaming about, do not know where, because the consciousness used to be attaching to some material before. It attached to your body before. It clings onto your body before when you were alive, and now it does not have someone to cling to, it does not have a material to cling to, it is in search of something to cling to attach to. We're always attached to material, you know. We're not comfortable when we're not, because we've been so much used to attaching to some material that we're not comfortable when you're not attaching to anything. It's just like our mind have been so ignorant that we attach to material. We want fame, we require fame, reputation, money, a mansion, good clothes, beauty, money, everything we want material. We are living in a world of materialistic world. We like to attach to material, right? We're so much used to it. We started that when we were a baby. And now you don't, all of a sudden, when you die, you only have a consciousness. You're not comfortable with it. You're always in search of something to adhere to. But you can't just go into any material, because according to the theory of causality, there must be something that relates you to the material. Here's a man and a woman making love, and you're in that Bardo stage. And what is the definition of making love? A fusion of a spermatozoa and an ovum. Zoom, fused together. That forms the first material of a baby. We call it namarupam. And whenever there's a fusion, there's a light. We may not be able to see it. A fusion gives out energy too. And what is energy? Energy is light. It's just our eyes cannot see all kinds of energy. We can only see crude energy. I can see the light now. I can see two bright lights shining on me. These are crude lights. Human eyes are so limited. We can only see crude energy. You know a bumblebee? A bumblebee can see much finer energy than we. A bumblebee is hovering around the petals of a flower. The flower gives out the energy. It knows where to suck those pollen. We don't know. Not just bumblebee. There are many, many other animals that have much finer, detection of energy than us. This is just common sense. So this fusion of a man and a wife produce energy. And that energy produces light. And this consciousness have a special feeling of that. Why? Because in previous life, this consciousness were familiar with the man and the woman. That man could have been the granddad of this consciousness. That woman could have been the daughter in many lives ago of this consciousness. They always have some causality that tie them together. That man, this consciousness here, that man owed $6 million and he has to repay him. And this, he has to repay her with $2 million. They have some unfinished business somehow. They have some unfinished business. They zoom into the body and form the nama-rupam. And we call it, dependent on consciousness, the mind and body arises. What is mind and body? That nama-rupam. Nama-rupam is the first material inside the body, or we call it the embryo stage. But the Buddha gave it a name. It has a mind, it has a body. The mind is, of course, immature mind. The body is, of course, immature body. Now that explains the past. So you say, why did I get into this world? Because of your ignorance, that you have performed many volitional reactions that create all this karmic energy, and all this karmic energy leads you to your life, and then when you die, you shrink into that consciousness, and then you go into the next life again, you go into this life again. Every life is like that. And if I am a careful reader, I would ask, you said number one is dependent on ignorance, volitional reaction arises. Where does ignorance come from? I mean, you're just cutting half the water and say, this is water. Where does the water come from? What is ignorance? What gives rise to ignorance? Are you not going to question that? Or you just accept what I said? It's not right to accept whatever I said. You start with ignorance. Well, how come you start with ignorance? Where does ignorance come from? Ignorance comes from what? Ignorance comes from, if I just use, I can go on and on and on, but I just use just one word and then I explain that word, of course. Ignorance comes from causality. Ignorance comes because of many reasons, many causes. And every one of these causes does not have its own nature. Say, for example, if a man kills a woman, of course, it's criminally ignorance. Why did he do that? Are there no reason for it? There must be many reasons why that man killed that woman. Of course, it's ignorance, right? It's not wisdom. Killing someone is not wisdom, it's ignorance. But where does that killing concept come from? It comes from ignorance. Where does ignorance come from? Ignorance comes from, why did he kill her? There are many reasons to it. And all these reasons tied together is like a labyrinth of reasons, one knot tying each other. And let's examine these reasons. Oh, they're husband and wife. And the man suspected the woman of adultery, for example. Why did he get the suspicion? Well, he saw her having a romance with another guy. But it happened that they just maybe bumped into an old friend at school. Actually, there was nothing like that happened. But because of his jealousy, he created a lot. Why did he have that jealousy? Because at young age, he was brought up that way. In his family, when he was young, he was brought up in a broken home where the dad and the mom always have this kind of jealousy around, and that affect him. And the reasons can extend on and on and on. How did you identify the first cause, the first reason? So don't say that, what is the first cause of ignorance? You can't identify the first cause of ignorance. Because we always believe in, what is the beginning of that cause? What is the beginning of ignorance? If there's a beginning, there's an end. It's illogical. There's no beginning. There's no starting point and there's no ending point. Spring, autumn, summer, autumn, and winter. Which one starts first? You tell me. Spring starts first? Preceding spring is winter. If there's no winter, there was wouldn't have been spring. So which comes first? In the Niagara Falls, I used to go down there with raincoat, and at one time I was thinking, the water that's coming down, how did it come about like that? Where did the water come from? Does the water originate from the mountain up on the hill, and then this fall happened? Where did the water come from? The water comes from the crust of the earth, the humidity, and then where did the humidity come from? The humidity come from the rain. Where did the rain come from? The rain from the cloud from the sky, and all this evaporation comes from the water in the ocean. It's a loop. How can you identify the first reason for it? You can go on and on. Ignorance comes from causality, comes from many, many reasons of which there's no beginning. You can't identify the beginning. Yes, you can, only when you transcend temporal wisdom. Only when you are the Buddha. You transcend regular wisdom. We call it Anuttara Samya Sambuddhi. Because using our mind now, which is a polluted mind, we're not in a position to find out that. Because our mind is already polluted. Our mind. It's because our polluted mind, our polluted consciousness that reincarnate into this world. Only when our mind is free from all these pollutants will we be able to know exactly what happened before. And many of the Buddhist disciples ask the same question. Oh, Bhagavate, I want to ask a question. Where did I come from? I want to know the first cause. Am I created? If I don't know the first cause, I'm not going to believe in you, because really I want to know where I came from. And the Buddha always gives this parable to explain it. We call it the parable of poisonous arrow. You like to know about the parable of the poisonous arrow? Shooting arrow. There was a man at the crossroad. It's good to repeat and think about it. There's a man at the crossroad, and then one was traveling on the crossroad, and suddenly an arrow was shooting from somewhere and hit his chest. Not directly into the heart, otherwise it would be dead. Hit into the chest. And he was wounded, seriously wounded on the road. And everybody was flocking on to him and said, what happened? The man was seriously wounded by the arrow. The parable of this is that arrow is the world. It's coming to the world, getting all this suffering. He was seriously wounded by the arrow. And everybody was coming up and see what happened. And one guy said, where did the arrow come from that got into this man's chest? Another guy said, how come the arrow is come from that way or this way? What's the arrow made up of? Is it made up of wood, of metal? And if it's made up of metal, what kind of metal? Is it copper? Is it just a piece of stone? They find out the source of the arrow. But the most important action to do is not to find out where the arrow is coming from. The first is to rush him to the hospital. Get him cured first. Otherwise he'll be dead. You ask too many questions. You want the first cause. You want who created the world, who created you. You ask all these questions of which your polluted mind is not in a position to know. And you ask too many questions, you're dead. You can't save the man anymore. The first is to rush him to the hospital and to treat him. In other words, you follow the Buddhist teaching and the practice to cure yourself, to purify your mind first, and once your mind is all purified, you are in a much better position to know why. So 1 and 2, I explain 1 and 2. 1 and 2 explain the past and a little bit of the present. Why am I here? Well, I grow, I become the mind and body in my mom's womb, and then developing of the embryo, then I come out, and then I cling to the world, I attach to material, I create a lot of karma, and then when I died, I became shrink into the light consciousness again and roam about and finding another attachment, and then I see another fusion, I get into there again. So we've been rolling that. We've been changing our form, but we haven't changed our consciousness. We've been in the row of existence, rolling into different hotels. 5-star, 2-star, 4-star, bed and breakfast. Only bread and breakfast, no dinner. Well, they're like that. They're hotels like that. The 5-star presidential suite, you roll into a presidential suite, oh, you enjoy everything in life. You roll into a 3-star at worst, you roll into a bed and breakfast, you can only stay in the morning. So you roll into all different hotels, but who roll into, who check in and who check out? You yourself. You check in and check out yourself. Nobody else. But you're changing your hotel. You're changing this body. This body is a hotel. You think this body is permanent? No. It's just a hotel that you're entitled to. Who gives you this hotel? Nobody gives you this hotel. You book it yourself. You create your own destiny. You did a lot of good things in your previous life, you got a good hotel in this life. You get all kinds of bad things in your previous life, you get a bread and breakfast. May not even have breakfast. You're on the road, a sleeping bag in a tent.